Merchant of Venice, Act 3, Scene 3 and Scene 4. So, Scene 3 takes place in a street in Venice with Shylock, Salanio, Antonio, and in they walk. And essentially, Shylock is talking about wanting to exact his revenge and take his bond from Antonio. Now, we have this interesting line from Shylock. I'll have my bond, speak not against my bond. I have sworn an oath that I will have my bond. And here we've got some language technique from Shakespeare. We can see the rule of three, but also repetition of the word bond. In fact, repetition of the phrase my bond. And repetition is one of the language devices often employed by Shakespeare to show obsession. He is obsessed now. Shylock is obsessed with taking his revenge on Antonio, getting the pound of flesh, exacting his bond. And as you can see, I've put a picture of James Bond, but that's not what it means at all. It means taking from Antonio what is lawfully and rightfully his to take 1 pound of his flesh. And Antonio, of course, doesn't want it to happen. But there isn't a lot he can do about it. Now, we also see that Shylock has this very clever line, since I am a dog, beware my fangs. And this is another example from Shakespeare of the clever use of wordplay. It is often the minority characters in this play, the weak minority of the Jew and the woman, of Shylock and of Portia, who are empowered by Shakespeare through the intelligent and clever use of language. Now, we understand with the character of Portia, I think, we would say, Shakespeare is fighting for almost an early form of feminism, and he wants women to be treated better, and we see that through how he often empowers his women and that kind of thing. But then we can ask ourselves the same question, well, what is he saying about the character of Shylock? Is Shakespeare empowering Shylock at times? And of course, it's not so regular, as we talked about already. There are often times when Shylock is built up to be some kind of hero and then brought right back down to earth to be very much a villain. But it does raise the question, what is Shakespeare trying to say about Jews? Is he trying to give a message about we should be respectful of Jews in a time in Elizabethan England when there was no respect for Jews? It's hard to say, but one thing we can say is that any kind of mistreatment is seen to be brought back on people. And, he's saying, well, if you've called me a dog, I've got fangs like a dog. So we can see that the way you treat me will come back on you is essentially what Shylock is saying. But the clever wordplay, again, hints at the fact that Shakespeare has a lot of respect for both Portia and for Shylock. This very short scene ends with Antonio making it very clear the Duke cannot deny the course of law, for the commodity that strangers have with us in Venice, if it be denied, will much impeach the justice of the state. And what he's basically saying is, look, we live in Venice. Now, Venice is the setting of commercial business. And this is the importance of the Venice setting in some ways, because it has to be that the law is exacted, because the whole place of Venice totally lives on the word and letter of the law, because there's so much business that takes place. So if Shakespeare had set this play in any other setting and somebody was really resolute, no, we must have the letter of the law must be recognised, and we must have it that the law is fulfilled, then we might, as an audience, quite rightly think, well, what does it matter if the law officials, the Duke, lets you off? But because the setting is Venice, certainly an Elizabethan England audience would understand, Venice is the commercial hub of the country, and therefore you cannot have hundreds of business transactions taking place if people know there is no respect for the law. So again, that's a way that this play is different for Elizabethan audiences to contemporary audiences, because the Elizabethan audience held Venice in a different sort of level of respect. Today we might just think of Venice essentially as a holiday destination. So the setting, often Shakespeare's plays and where they're set, is a very interesting topic. Many of Shakespeare's plays are set in the settings they are based in, because that is where the original story came from. The story of Romeo and Juliet being set in Verona is actually, set in Verona because the original story on which Shakespeare based the play is supposedly a true story and is actually a story from Verona. So there are a lot of times when, and of course Macbeth in Scotland, because that's where the story of Macbeth comes from. So there are a lot of times where Shakespeare really had no choice over where to set his plays because the original stories came from those settings. And that's not to say Shakespeare didn't write the play. He did write the play, but he obviously had to. A lot of his plays were influenced. They had a sort of a literary influence from before. Now, there are a couple of important things in The Merchant of Venice. It has to have Jews in it, so it couldn't be set in England because there were no Jews in England in Elizabethan times. But setting it in Venice works very well because obviously that is the hub of industry, which is so important in this play. And it's so important as well in helping us to understand just why it is that Shylock is so angry and so adamant that things take place as he wants them to, that the law is exacted as he wants it to be, because Shylock is angry, and Shylock is basically angry with Antonio because he's ruining his business, because Antonio will lend money without looking for financial reward. Well, why is that such a big deal? Because again, this is Venice, and Shylock is in Venice and running his business as a moneylender, and he can't run his business as a moneylender making a profit lending money if there's this Christian guy who, because of his Christian beliefs, because Jesus said don't lend for profit, lends for free and no interest. So the business transaction hub, the commerce and the commercial centre of Venice is important in the play because of that. And of course, there's lots of texts that might have originally influenced The Merchant of Venice. There is a tale in Italian called Il Pecorone, or The Simpleton, which was written in 1378, and it's thought that that would have been an influence on this story. It's a wealthy woman at Belmont who marries an upstanding young gentleman. Her husband needs money, and his friend, desperate to help, goes to a moneylender to borrow the money, and the moneylender, who is a Jew, demands £1 of flesh as payment. So again, it was an Italian story to begin with. Now, this isn't to say Shakespeare is stealing ideas. That's not the case at all. It was well known that he didn't come up with the original ideas. He took these ideas and then put them into plays, and did so brilliantly, and often added minor characters as well. But often we can ask ourselves, why is the setting so perfect for the story? And regularly it's because actually it's based on a true story, or at least something that somebody believes to be true, and therefore fits that setting because that's the setting it was based in. Okay, so in the next scene we have a long speech by Lorenzo. Now, just as Shylock is saying, I want my £1 of flesh, and Antonio kind of says, no, it's fair enough, he has to have it because the law has to be upheld, and it's this massive climactic moment. Shakespeare again changes the structure of the play, and there's another pacing scene here where we have a moment of great tension in scene 3, and now here we are in scene 4, and we change to a different storyline with Lorenzo and Portia having a conversation, and Jessica and Balthazar. And again, it's Shakespeare's brilliant use of structure that we as an audience are now really thinking, get on with it. I want to know what's happening with Shylock, and the tension is becoming more and more heightened. Very, very clever structuring. Now, there's just really one or two interesting things in this scene. One of them is this bit from Lorenzo. Madam, although I speak it in your presence, you have a noble and a true conceit of godlike amity, which appears most strongly in bearing thus the absence of your lord. But if you knew to whom you show this honour, how true a gentleman you send relief, how dear a lover of my lord your husband, I know you would be prouder of the work than customary bounty can enforce you. Now, in other words, Lorenzo is linking here Portia to Antonio, because of course the two of them aren't linked at the moment. And Lorenzo's saying that Antonio is a really good guy. So this is a plot device from Shakespeare to make the link between the two. And Portia wants to free her husband's friend, and friendship was often a theme of Elizabethan plays. In fact, it's argued that friendship was in Elizabethan England as important as romance, as important as love. So it's clear that Portia's going to be motivated to help out, and we finish with the line where she says to Nerissa, when we are both accoutred like young men. In other words, more of the theme of disguise. She's already had a plan that they're going to dress up as young men. And this, again, a theme of disguise, deception, things not being as they seem, is a key element to The Merchant of Venice.